Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Talking City podcast from the Manchester Evening News. I'm Tyrone Marshall in the host's chair today, joined by Simon Bajkowski, live from the City Football Academy by the looks of things. I will recognise that background easily. Si, how are you? You there? Yeah, bright and early and very keen as always.
Yes, yeah. Pep ended up being at 2:15 last Friday, so he's meant to be at 12:30 today. So we'll see how rigidly he sticks to that. He'll probably be at 11:30 now.
Yeah, that's the first tweet we want, please, when Pep walks in the room. We don't want any slackness continuing this season. It's already been a busy morning on the City front as well. We're recording this about 11 a.m. Ruben Dias, new contract confirmed about an hour ago. A significant statement, probably a contract that I think most people saw coming. I don't think there was any other doubt that Dias was going to leave or try and run it down or anything, but he's emerged as a real key player, hasn't he? The heartbeat of that defence, and a deal that City would have want to get over the line and get it signed.
Do you know what? It's kind of a significant deal on the players' side, and the players plural, because Dias has kind of wanted a new contract for most of this year. And with kind of Hugo Viana taking over from Cheeky Begirisson, there was a bit of uncertainty there. And not just for Dias, but for like the whole squad. Because everyone knows what Cheeky is like and how he operates. And they can't say the same for Hugo Viana. And so had Dias not been given a new contract, I think there would have been sort of question marks and a few worries from the whole squad. People thinking like, well, if he's not getting one, maybe I'm not getting one, or maybe I'm not getting what I want, and things like that. So it is a very significant deal in that sense, as well as the fact that it does tie Dias down. Also kind of just rubbishes some of the nonsense you see online about, we need to get some fans saying like, we need to get rid of all of these defenders. All of them aren't good enough from last season. And obviously, the club thinks that Ruben Dias is still very good, and that's why it's a 2-year extension, isn't it? It's 2029 with the option of another year until 2030. So, potentially 5 more years of Ruben Dias, which is very much a long-term commitment.
Yeah, and he's the first name on that team sheet as a defender, I think, when he's fit and available, isn't he? And with this new deal, does this make him favourite to be the next club captain? I know if you just had a club captain, but these days City captains don't tend to last more than a year. And I think the writing appears to be on the wall with Bernardo, I think, and going next summer when his contract's up. So there could be a vacancy there. I mean, Dias, it's something that's easily said about a central defender, but he looks a natural leader, doesn't he?
Yeah, he. I think he would have said the same thing, though, like 3 months ago. That was the thing. He looked like the next captain. When Walker and De Bruyne left. So the fact that it's gone to Bernardo Silva is a bit of a sideways shift. And also the fact that Haaland is in that captaincy group now makes you think again. So, but he's either going to be a City captain or he's going to be one of those players that is sort of like the greatest captains they never had. Because it doesn't really matter whether he has the armband or not. He spends the whole game kind of organising the defence and leading the team anyway. So, and the more of those people you can get on the pitch and in the dressing room, the better. I think Viana called him like the ultimate professional, and like he does live football 100%. He's got a high profile relationship now for the last few months, but he is like wholly committed to being in the best possible shape he can. To last like marathon seasons. So I think he had a few injury issues last year. He seems to think he's over those and he's ready to go again for a big year this year.
Yeah, probably in his peak years for a central defender as well. The comments he made about the City as well as the club when he signed shows that kind of affection he's got for the place. And I mean, let's go back to what you said at the start there about a big deal on the players' side, because there is clearly a change this year with Viana now running the show on his own, and he's taken over at a point where there's probably a few contract decisions that need to be made. I mean, there's a lot of players who are up next year or the year after that are probably going to go. There's others I mean, John Stones, I think, is up next year. That's going to be an interesting one, given he was in the team and playing pretty well, but a few injury issues. Maybe we'll come back to Stones. I mean, the 2027 cohort, in a way, is quite interesting because Diaz is signed now. Rodri and Foden and Phil Foden are both got now less than 2 years running on their contracts. I think with excuse me, with your key players, you get to under 2 years, and it's the kind of point where, you know, maybe nerves sit in a little bit, or you start to hear the clock ticking, don't you, on contract renewals. And as much as you might think at the time there's nothing to worry about here, we probably see with Alexander-Arnold at Liverpool that these things can develop quickly. I guess with Rodri and Foden, there's a desire to tie them both down, but also maybe reasons just to hold fire at the moment. Rodri, in terms of coming back from that knee injury, obviously Phil had a difficult year on and off the pitch last year, and maybe want to give him room to enjoy his football. But is there probably a sense that those two are next on kind of Viana's hit list when it comes to contracts, if they can get back to their best early stages of this season?
Again, I think if they're not, I think there's going to be a lot of questions asked in the dressing room, because those two are kind of seen as the important figures for City's future in the same way that Dias is, and Foden it kind of hits a bit more because of he's younger than Rodri and Dias, but also because he's homegrown. And again, there's been a lot of sort of intrigue around the homegrown situation this summer, you know, with James McAtee going and Rico Lewis potentially going, or City being open to him going, Nico O'Reilly even. And, you know, Foden having come off the year he had, I think it was a surprise really at Wolves to see so many homegrown players in the team. It felt at one point like City was shifting away from those sort of homegrown players in the squad. So if they can pivot back to that, then that would go down really well with the supporters.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, you know, maybe the most interesting of those three cases is Rodri, in the sense that he will be just turned 31 by the time his current contract expires. At the minimum, an extension is probably going to be 2 years, taken into when he's 33. It is a point when clubs start to, you know, maybe worry about giving older players contracts. Once a player has an ACL injury, the brutal reality is there's never any guarantee they will get back to their best. And we've seen a couple of false starts for Rodri, I guess, on the return front. But at the same time, I think, you know, you're seeing stories already, aren't you, in certain Madrid-based newspapers that would suggest Real are pretty keen on it. I think, you know, Rodri was asked when he was doing his random interviews for the Ballon d'Or about Real Madrid's interest. And certainly, you know, he gave an answer that I think was probably designed for City in terms of those contract negotiations. But I think it was something along the lines of, when Real Madrid come calling, you have to listen. And it's one of those situations, isn't it, where you can understand City not wanting to rush into giving Rodri a new contract, but at the same time, there's a club potentially circling who are the masters of exploiting these situations.
Yeah, I'm fairly sure that City will have made it clear to Rodri that they would like to keep him for longer. And also, you've kind of got to think that it's been City who have been paying his wages for all this time, and City who made such a big deal out of him winning the Ballon d'Or when Real Madrid didn't bother to turn up, precisely because Rodri had won the Ballon d'Or. So I think it would surprise a hell of a lot of people if Rodri ended up turning around and saying, thanks for getting me back to my best. I'm just going to sign for these people who disrespected me. You know, maybe it happens, but I, for one, would be surprised. But, you know, Viana does seem, you know, has caused a bit of a stir this summer, I think it's fair to say, and the squad has been shaken up, and City have had really, you know, 2 years with Kevin De Bruyne where they didn't see anywhere near the best of him because he couldn't recover from, you know, it was one injury too far for him, or two injuries too far for him really, and he was upset when he was told that he wasn't getting a new contract, but it was a business decision made by, you know, the sporting director, and it will be interesting to see kind of how long City want to wait with Rodri and his fitness before fully committing to giving him a new contract, because I think there might be a bit more of a wait time now than there was.
Yeah, I think you're probably right on that. And I guess one of the contract story to touch on, it's been quite the week for Rico Lewis. It's probably not even fully a week from going to Nottingham Forest to being a surprise starter to playing superbly to saying I don't want to go anywhere to looking like he's going to get a new 5-year contract. Story done by Jack Gord at the Mail in the week. In the end, presuming this deal is signed and sealed and delivered and Lewis stays, we are reaching the right outcome, aren't we? I think Forest clearly had encouragement from somewhere, but I don't think any City fans want to see Lewis go, really, even though he had a tricky end to last season. And you touched already on the homegrown players. It's the kind of player that needs to be in that squad, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I think some fans may have been happy for him to leave, and certainly some people on the internet, even more on the internet, might have been happy for him to leave. And it kind of, I don't think there's any skirting around. City were open to letting him go, because, like you say, Forest certainly had encouragement that he could leave. But yeah, I mean, like you say, what a week, what a 180 for him. It's not unheard of that things could have been going concurrently, and it's kind of like either you sign a new deal this summer or you leave. But it's just a real turnaround, and that's kind of adds into, like we've been talking about, this sort of shock factor that has been around the whole squad this summer, where you don't really know what's happening next, and it's not an amazing position for the likes of us to be in, where we're used to sort of things being more predictable, I suppose. But at the same time, it does give us some interesting things to talk about and write about.
Yeah, we've probably seen that with, again, some of the transfer stuff this week that's kind of followed on from last week. Savinho slightly back in the headlines. Akanji going to Galatasaray, then put it on Instagram. Am I? This is news to me. The brief Nathan Ake and Everton stories. There's an awful lot going on at the moment, isn't there? And it's going to be another week, by the looks of things, where the squad beyond Echeverry, in terms of permanent departures, the squad is essentially the same size as it was last week. Guardiola said after Wolves, this squad is too big. The clock is ticking, isn't it, on departures, and still feels like things need to accelerate in that area.
Yeah, they do. And Akanji was kind of like seen as one of the players who it would make more sense for him to leave. There was still kind of no certainty. And when, stuff like Savinho pops up, you're like, all right, well, maybe that will be like the non-homegrown players to leave, and we'll leave it at that. But yeah, we don't know, is Ederson going? Is Ortega going? Are they both staying? Is one of them staying? Can you say, the Ake stuff linked to Everton from nowhere? Ake's obviously homegrown as well, so there'd be no kind of benefit to selling him that way. People at City and Everton kind of quick to say no, there's nothing to that. You've also got this sort of weird, someone mentioned to me, like the Everton have got a leak issue where David Moyes is trying to find out who's putting information out, who's telling people information that they shouldn't be doing. So was the Ake stuff a trap for that? It's been, I don't know who to trust anymore, Ty. No. So it's a hell of a thing. Like, I think Akanji will probably end up going. I think he was kind of like basically accusing a reporter of jumping the gun, I think. But like, the interest is there, and like, as far as I know, the interest had not been knocked back by the player in his camp this week. So I can definitely see it happening. But equally, we could be back in next week saying, well, Akanji's staying and Josko Gvardiol's off. Who knows? It's been a really weird summer, and will be for the next 2 weeks, because as you say, there's a hell of a lot of business to be done.
Yeah, there is. And if, the Ederson, I guess, is kind of linked to Donnarumma and a little bit more uncertainty. But within that squad, you'd say, Ortega, we were told was going when they signed Trafford, but is still here and was on the bench at the weekend. And then I think you'd look Akanji and Gundogan as the two candidates that City would want to go, in that neither are homegrown. I think both got a message with substitutes last weekend, with Kusanov and O'Reilly coming on ahead of them. But to put you on the spot now, what are all three? Do you think this transfer window will close with all of Ortega, Akanji, and Gundogan having left City? Because that is the outcome City are clearly working towards, isn't it? That would be what City want, I think.
Yeah. I'm not sure it does end with all three leaving. I think maybe Akanji and Gundogan will go. I can see Ederson staying. I don't know if Savinho will end up going. I don't know if that may. Obviously, sort of the situation for Tottenham gets worse by the hour.
Yeah.
With they've already lost Maddison to a serious injury. There's now talk that Kulusevski will be out for months, and Arsenal have hijacked Eze. They kind of really need a good news boost. But of course, they're playing City tomorrow, so we're never going to let Savinho go before the Spurs game. I don't know if that maybe accelerates. It's over a week now since certain people reported the Ederson transfer as if it was done and as if he was gone and Donnarumma was coming in. And it's getting on for 9-10 days and it's all kind of quieting down a bit. And you just wonder whether, not saying that it didn't happen, but that talks were had, but then it's not really moved anywhere. And things like Akanji have come up since and seem to be further on. So yeah, I'm not sure what's your prediction for who's going to leave?
I think, surely Ortega is going to leave. There seemed a lot of confidence that was going to happen when Trafford came in, so you would expect it to. And I can't see. Ortega didn't really want to be second choice. I can't imagine he wants to be third choice. Akanji, that feels fairly likely now. I guess Gundogan's the uncertainty. I don't know. It's really hard to call, isn't it? And the longer it goes on, the more we reach the possibility of a kind of left field sale, don't we? Because for me, I think it's obvious there are too many central midfielders and too many central defenders in this squad. And those are the areas. You look at Savinho, and selling Savinho probably need a replacement. And I think what City need to avoid, this squad is too big, so you need to sell players without getting a replacement. And to do that, you sell a midfielder, you sell a defender, maybe even a couple of players in one of those positions. But if the players you want to leave don't leave, it kind of presents a different dilemma, doesn't it? Which is why we're seeing these more left field options present themselves.
And also, it felt like, because Echeverri is someone who City have liked a lot since he came. And as the summer went on and he still wasn't leaving and sort of there was a bit of a whisper of he is kind of young enough that you could keep him and not register him in the Champions League squad because you've got too many non-homegrown players, but just say we're going to use you in the Premier League. Not as much as say Chelsea used Cole Palmer last season, but just being you're still going to play a part. It just won't be in the Champions League. Now, obviously, he's got World Cup ambitions with Argentina and hell of a responsibility in it to get the number 9 at Leverkusen. But maybe that is fine with someone at the other end of the career. And Ilkay Gundogan, you say, you showed last season when everyone was fit, you were still a really good player and you could still offer things. I've got too many players. I've got better players than you. Reinders has arrived as kind of your replacement. He's going to be in the Champions League squad. You're not. But you're still probably going to make games in the Premier League. We're going to get injuries. And if you don't want to leave, if you want to stay, we're not going to force you out and you can play in the Premier League. And maybe something like that happens. Could that happen with even like an Akanji. I don't think it would, but we're reaching that kind of situation as time ticks away.
Yeah, we are. And I mean, the interesting thing with Echeverry and Reece, I think, to a degree, is that if this was a classic 22 man Guardiola squad, I think there's potential that both would have stayed and been maybe the fifth centre-back and the fifth midfielder or something like that and got their fair share of games. But in the current climate, with the size of this squad as it is, they both had to go on loan, really, which clearly presents an issue. And the other thing is, I mean, every time Guardiola talks about the size of the squad, his biggest issue is having those conversations with players where he has to say, you're not selected. And he clearly hates doing that, doesn't he? Which kind of brings us on to this weekend and the possibility of, I mean, like I said, Guardiola is due to speak in an hour, hopefully. And he'll give us a fitness update then. But at the bare minimum, you'd probably expect Rodri and Foden to be back. So at some point today, Guardiola might have to pull aside maybe Akanji, maybe Aki, maybe Gundogan and say, you're not in the matchday squad this week.
Yeah.
And to players of that stature and that calibre who achieved what they have at City, he's going to hate doing that, isn't he?
Well, I don't think he is. He has hated doing it, and I think he hated doing it last season. But, I mean, like when we spoke to him last week, it kind of got to the point where he was like, I told him all months ago, like, if you want to stay, you stay, but you're not going to make the squad. You're going to have to get used to not being in the squad a lot of the time. So it's kind of he is not going to force players out. And if they want to stay, they stay. But he's been clear with them. So I think it'll be a lot easier for him to leave players out of the squad than it has been for like his entire career, because he's comfortable saying that, like, well, everyone knows the deal. It's not like a load of new people have arrived in January, like happened last season, and that's kind of changed the dynamic of the squad. It's like, since before the Club World Cup, we've known how big the squad is. So if you can see the competition in front of you and still want to stay, then like that's fine. But you know, the squad has never been this big, but it's happened before with the likes of Alex Zinchenko, where he was told in like 4 consecutive windows to leave when they accepted offers for him, and he just said no, and he stuck around, and he became one of the most valuable players at certain times in the years he was here. So I'm not saying that anyone this year is going to do that, but I think Guardiola is not going to be as upset about leaving players out because everyone knows the deal.
Yeah. No, that's a fair point. And I mean, when it comes to this weekend, then what are we kind of expecting team-wise? Did things go so well last week that it's basically unchanged? I mean, I don't think Rodri's going to be fit enough to start yet. I'd be surprised if Foden comes straight into the team. Is it a case if you just send that 11 back out and say, go and do that again?
Well, I mean, no idea who's number one, because Ederson's number one.
Yeah.
And Pep said last week Ederson was going to start at Wolves, and then it turned out he came down with gastroenteritis in the minutes between Pep telling us that and the bus leaving. Very unfortunate for him.
Rapid onset.
Yeah, but that as an illness is not one that kicks around. So you would fully expect Ederson to be available for this weekend, unless he's unfortunately contracted something else. And if he's fit, then presumably he plays because he's number one. But this is kind of, you know, the chaos. Chaos has been the theme of a lot of the summer, and it will continue into this weekend, really, because you know, Trafford was brilliant last week, and don't think anyone would have any issues with him keeping his place this week. But it would kind of go against what Guardiola has said very recently, unless there is another injury or illness. So yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, we're probably in for a surprise one way or another in the next 24 hours, aren't we?
Yeah.
Either at the press conference or when the team drops in just under 24 hours now. There's probably going to be something that happens that, like, right, okay, what are we reading into that then? What's happening there? And when it comes to the game, it's it's going to be an interesting one as well, because, I mean, City were excellent last weekend. There's no doubt about that. But Wolves looked particularly poor and I think could be in for a difficult season. Tottenham are a funny one in that they played pretty well last week, albeit against probably even more mediocre opposition. They've since had another disastrous week off the pitch. I mean, only Tottenham could manage to lose out on Eze to Arsenal, having literally a couple of hours ago annoyed their 2-goal scorer from the previous weekend by suggesting he should go to Crystal Palace as a make-weight. It seems incredibly Spursy, but Tottenham have caused City problems in the past, albeit under a different manager, but Thomas Frank has caused City problems in the past as well. So it feels like this is going to be a much better gauge of where City are at the start of this season than Wolves was last week.
Yeah, I mean, Tottenham are nowhere near their best and they're under a new coach, albeit a very experienced and good coach. So City should win, but the more City should win when they play Tottenham, the more Tottenham win. So it's going to be, I think, City players, both returning and new, should have that bit of extra fire with it being the first home game that they will want to really be extra motivated to win, and as well because it's Tottenham. Everyone has kind of got that little bit of extra fire anyway coming back from the summer to be that bit better, and I think that will push into the first home game. It's just whether we did see a few wobbles at Wolves in terms of Wolves were kind of pretty good between 20 to 35 minutes, weren't they? And then they started the second half well, gave City a few problems. So Tottenham are a team that are good enough to score out of nothing, and Thomas Frank is very good at set pieces. So there's every chance City are troubled tomorrow. You just kind of think that they will probably have enough. Do you think?
I think so. Yeah. Like I say, it's a difficult one to call. It did that 20 to 35 minute spell was interesting at Wolves, in that it felt a little like last season, in that City would start games well, or read pretty well, but not create a lot. And you'd often see teams kind of grow in confidence and stature and belief against them last year. Like, actually, we can cause them problems here. And it just felt like Wolves were starting to do that. And then City obviously had that brilliant 3-minute spell. Reinders took the game away from them and ended it there and then, basically. But that for me, that spell was quite interesting, and it did feel a bit like last season, in that Wolves were like, we feel like we can get at these. Yeah. And, it'll be interesting if that happens again. But maybe players like Reinders, they've got better players, better first 11. And as things click, maybe those spells will happen earlier those moments for City will happen earlier in games, and they'll control things still more. But I still think these early weeks are going to be fascinating with City to see just how substantial the improvements are. Because it's worth going back as well to, I was saying to, I think it was Shalom from the BBC, that, I mean, the last 3 competitive games for City now, they've been back against Juventus, they've not been back against Al Hilal, and now they've been back against Wolves. So if we're following the pattern, maybe they're not going to be back. But it's, it's worth bearing in mind, in that it sandwiched between 2 fantastic performances is a game which completely exposed all the flaws that were there last season against Al Hilal. So it's probably wise for us not to be getting too carried away just yet.
Yes, yeah, and Spurs is a particular banana skin, even at home. It's 4-0 last year, wasn't it, to Spurs. So I think City fans can feel a lot more confident if on Monday they're talking about another big win for City.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that will give us more confidence that we are edging towards City being back. But we'll have you covered all weekend on the MEN, from Guardiola's press conference on Friday lunchtime to the game on Saturday lunchtime. So stick with us. We'll also be back in your ears on Monday, I think, summing up any transfer developments over the weekend, of which there are bound to be some, and all the events from the Etihad. So do tune in then. Please review if you've enjoyed us. Remember to give us a like and subscribe to get the latest in your feeds. And that's all for now. We'll speak to you all soon.